And welcome back, folks. We are looking at Henry Barrie, Vimy Ridge Survivor, Chapter 12, The War Ended. On November 12th, 1918, Henry was told to report to the train station at 9:10 the next morning, report to the 6th Reserve Battalion in Whitley. However, everyone was talking about the war ending. He bought a Daily Mirror to make sure, and there it was. World War over. Folkestone Armistice signed. He wasn't sure what he should be doing, so he just walked around. People kept coming up and shaking his hand. Henry just walked around and tried to picture what was next. So he thought the best thing was to just follow orders and stick to the routine. He reported to Whitley Camp, where he was immediately told to report to Kimmel Park Hospital in Whitley. When he got there, he was told he was being admitted and sent back for immediate return to Canada. The next 2 months just flew by. On December 7th, Henry had his teeth examined and was told he had 30 cavities. His toothbrush had been lost for a while, and Henry guessed that he had been eating too many candies at the pictures. He was getting letters every couple of days from everyone. He was writing everyone back. Everyone at home was good, but it sounded like some people were coming down with some flu bug in Lanark. Nettie and her family were doing fine as well. On Christmas Day, Henry had a fine meal again, but didn't feel well afterwards. He went to see the doctor the next day and told he had mumps. He had to stay in bed until January 17th. On January 18th, a bunch of the 130 lads arrived at Kimmel Park, and there was a great reunion. However, Jimmy wasn't there, and the lads didn't know anything about him. Most hadn't received their letters yet, so Henry caught them up on the news back home. He did some sightseeing in the area and went to Rio for a football game and to the cathedral in St. Asaph. Henry commented in his diary that the cathedral was built in 500 AD, torn down by King Edward I, and then rebuilt in 1752. It was 130 steps up to the tower. On Saturday, February 1st, Henry got on the 4:30 a.m. and left for Liverpool. He pulled out at 9 a.m. and was in Liverpool by 9 p.m. The next morning, he sailed out at 9 a.m. again on the SS Carmenia for Halifax. It was even bigger than the SS Lapland. He was told that it had 3 propellers driven by steam engines and was 660 feet long and 72 feet wide. It also had 4.7-inch guns on the side and apparently sunk a German ship during the war. It was extremely cold the whole time and snowed a lot, but he arrived in Halifax in 7 days on Saturday, February 8th. He was on the train that night and was at Ottawa on Monday, February 10th at 9 p.m. He got his papers taken care of the next day, and Lance Affleck and he headed for Perth. Henry met Father and was home by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, February 12th. On the way home, Father was pretty quiet. The only thing he said was, "You should probably go see the trails tomorrow." The next day, with great dread, Henry went to the trail house to see if Jimmy was home yet. When he arrived, Mr. and Mrs. Trail greeted him. Henry said, "Hello, is Jimmy home yet? I haven't seen or heard of him for a while and wondering if you knew when he was coming home." Mr. Trail replied, "Oh, Henry, Jimmy isn't coming home. We got news a couple months ago that Jimmy was killed on the battlefield. I'm so sorry. I know the two of you were close." Henry mumbled, "Yes, we were. He was going to be my best man. I'm sorry for your loss." And with that, Henry bowed his head and left. That ride home was the longest ride of his life. He couldn't understand why God spared him and took Jimmy home. And now Jimmy was gone. Henry wondered what Jimmy was thinking when he was on that battlefield. Did he immediately die? Or was he lying there for a few minutes calling out for help and no one answering? Or maybe Jimmy was at peace. Maybe he knew he was going to heaven and he just laid there waiting for Jesus to come. Henry had to stop and just cried. Henry said, "I hope he died quickly and that he knew that he was loved by God. Oh, Jimmy, I miss you." When Henry got home, he just went to his room and cried. Ma brought some food and kept checking on him, but didn't say anything. Everyone was really quiet and left him alone. The next couple of weeks, Henry had visitors every day, dinner and receptions, given some gifts, and visited all his old friends. Finally, on February 28th, Henry went to Kingston to get his fillings done, his final medical examination, his discharge papers, and with that, Henry wrote his final journal entry and slept and slept and slept. At his final medical exam, Henry was found to have grown 2 inches to 6 feet exactly, lost 10 pounds to 175, had a large scar on his left cheek, and was found to be medically unfit for any further war service. Due to that injury, Henry was granted an additional $420 for a war gratuity. During those 2 weeks, Henry found out that Jimmy Trail had died on September 2nd, 1918. He would never speak of Jimmy again. And so it's during this chapter that we learn the cost of war, that Henry lost his best friend Jimmy, and it was done in a way where Jimmy actually, it was in the very end of the war, as the Canadians were really leading the charge across the battlefield. In terms of Canadian casualties, it was actually the worst time of the entire war. We think of Vimy Ridge, but in terms of the loss of life from Vimy Ridge, it was actually fairly small. It was the last 100 days of the war where we saw most of our casualties, and Jimmy Trail was one of them. There was also a little bit of a reference made where Henry heard that there was a flu bug going through Lanark during that time. Well, that flu bug was actually the Spanish flu, which is getting talked about a lot because the Spanish flu is actually the largest pandemic in the history of our world. It actually saw more than 6 million people during that time from 1917 to 1920 die because of the Spanish flu. And in fact, there was more Canadians that died as a result of the Spanish flu than there was even in World War I. And so it was, as I said before, the worst pandemic ever. And it was one that had as much effect on our country today, had as much effect on our towns and our people and where we are in terms of resources and population and so on as anything else our country has ever seen. As we get ready, though, Henry was able to move on. It was through, again, his love for God and his ability to continue to look toward the future that we see in our next chapter. Henry really begins to turn his life around. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.